The LA Kings probably played their best game of the season, but it's not enough to get a win in Winnipeg. Still, I think more positives than negatives. We'll talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, a nightly podcast and YouTube show that wraps up the night in the NHL, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. The LA Kings played Game 3 of the NHL season, another matchup against a quality opponent, last year's President's Trophy winners, the Winnipeg Jets, this one on the road, and the Kings end up losing by a score of 3-2. But the big takeaway from this game for me is that I thought the Kings played their best game of the season. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to obviously get the win, but I do think there were a lot of good things to take away from this game. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting the Kings should feel any kind of satisfied or good after this game. It's about results. They didn't get the results that they're paid to get, but I'm also realistic about how I look at these games. I want to be fair to the Kings and not every loss or every win is the same. Sometimes you don't play that well, but you get the bounces and you win. Sometimes you play well and it doesn't go your way. I thought this game was a little bit more of that than the other. So, the season opener, didn't feel good about that, obviously, in the loss. This one, I'm not saying you feel good about it, but I think you feel a lot better because of the way that the Kings played. Let's get to the game stats in this one. The Kings, again, losing by a score of 3-2. Shots on goal did favor Winnipeg 35-26. Power plays. Kings 0 for 5. Jets were 1 for 4. Faceoffs favored the Kings 51.6% to 48.4%. Hits favored Winnipeg narrowly 26-23. Block shots favored Winnipeg by a large margin 28-11. So I'm a glasses half full kind of guy. So let's start with something good. Coming into this game, I had talked about how bad the Kings had been in the second periods of their first two games. I think the Kings had their best period so far this season in the second period against the Jets. The Kings got on the forecheck. They had a lot of zone time. They had some quality chances, and they scored a couple of goals. And for the most part, they limited zone time and quality chances for Winnipeg, and they committed no penalties in the second period. The Kings were not as good in the third, but not bad. And even though they had some quality chances in the first period, the first period wasn't the Kings' best period. And we'll get to the first period coming up in a minute. But here's what head coach Jim Hiller, or a little part of what head coach Jim Hiller had to say after that loss to Winnipeg, where he said, quote, "The last 40 minutes, despite the outcome, was probably the best we've played consecutive periods so far this season." And I would certainly agree with that. Like I said, I thought the second period was the best period the Kings have played this year. I think the second and third periods together were of a quality that I think it was probably the Kings' best game of the season. Obviously only 3 games, but still, it is what it is. Now, Jim Hiller didn't mention the first period. He said the last 40 minutes because the first period wasn't a great start for LA. Winnipeg did get a lot of zone time. They got chances. They got shots on goal. And the Kings took 3 penalties in the opening period, technically 4. There was a fighting major. It didn't result in a shorthanded situation. But we talked about the Kings taking way too many penalties in the first 2 games of the season. They took 6 against Colorado. They took 6 against Vegas. And in this game, they ended up taking 4 that resulted in shorthanded opportunities. 3 in the opening period. Obviously, that's not what you want. It's not how you want to start. It did result in a power play goal for the Jets. It also, it's indicative of you being on your heels, playing a lot in your own zone for the most part, and then taking penalties because you're getting outskated or outworked. So that is still something the Kings need to work out so far this season. Way too many penalties being taken. And since it is a thing, we're going to focus on it a little bit more than we normally would otherwise and actually talk about the penalties that were taken. So the 3 penalties in the first period, one was a Quinton Byfield hold. I honestly didn't see it. They didn't show a replay of it on the game broadcast, so I can't really say if it was a bad penalty or not, but that was the penalty where the Jets did score on the power play. Brian Dumoulin took a cross-checking penalty while he was protecting the front of the Kings net, and that's fine, but you can't get your stick up into the neck or face area. He did. Yes, the Jets' Mark Scheifele did embellish it, and you might wonder why not call it on both players. Remember, Quinton Byfield got called for embellishing against Vegas, and my answer to that would be different referees in a different game, and some referees have different standards, so they didn't call the embellishment on Scheifele, but it was a penalty on Dumoulin. Alex Ferrier was called for a high stick, just one of those bad luck plays. He fell down, his stick got up in the Jets player's face. It wasn't malicious, it wasn't careless, it was just bad luck on that one. Second period, no penalties taken. In the third period, Joel Armia got called for holding, and that was the right call. So again, too many penalties for the LA Kings. That is something they need to clean up, especially against teams that have very good power plays like Colorado, like Vegas, and like Winnipeg. So 4 power plays against, I would say 2 of those 4 penalties at least were preventable, and taking 3 penalties in the opening period on the road against a good team. Obviously, that is not a blueprint for success. The Kings power play was 0 for 5, and it sounds terrible, and obviously the result is, but other than the Kings, I think first power play, I thought they were mostly able to get it set up. I thought they had some good puck movement, and I thought they had some good looks. But, just like overall, I understand the results are what matter for the game, and overall, the results are what matter on the power play, and they had 5 opportunities and they didn't score. But again, kind of like the game, there were a lot of good things. It wasn't like the power. We've seen the Kings go over 4, over 5 on a power play before, and they couldn't get it set up, and they got no zone time, and they didn't get any quality scoring chances. That wasn't the case in this game. So I feel, look, 0 for 5 is over 5, but it wasn't as bad as that might seem if you didn't see the game. We've been focusing on the defensive numbers. I thought they were good in this game. If you look at the time on ice for the defensemen, Drew Doughty led the way, but 22 minutes and 10 seconds. I like that number for Drew. Mikey Anderson was second, 18 minutes and 44 seconds. And Brant Clark was third, 18 minutes and 21 seconds. Then you had Joel Edmondson, 16 minutes, 57 seconds. Brian Dumoulin, 15 minutes, 45 seconds. And Cody Ceci, 15 minutes and 9 seconds. So we talked about how Brant Clark had the fewest minutes of any defenseman. The previous game talked about how that was probably likely because the Kings had to kill 6 power plays and he doesn't play on, or excuse me, 6 power plays and Brant Clark doesn't play on the penalty kill. I said, let's wait and see what it looks like when it's more of an even 5-on-5 game. I think that's what we had in this one. So I did like the minutes played for Brant Clark in this one. We showed the game stats earlier, and I know in terms of face-off numbers, the Kings were better than the Jets, and they were improved from the last game against Vegas. But it seems to me, and this is something I'm going to try and keep track of going forward, but the big face-offs, quote unquote, seemed to me the Kings were losing a lot of those. Now, what is a big face-off? That's a face-off that is taken to start a power play. That's a face-off taken after a team ices the puck. And you lose that face-off, they clear it, they get a line change. You lose the face-off to start a power play, they clear it, and it takes you longer to set it up, and you have less time with the man advantage. So those key face-offs are difference-making face-offs. And it seemed to me, and again, like I said, I'll keep track of this going forward so we can have a better idea of it, but it seemed like the Kings lost a lot of those big face-offs. So they need to do a better job on that. I've talked about in some of the most recent games, the Avalanche, the Golden Knights, that the Kings needed to step up against other teams' elite players, the Kings can't really match up against those big-time players. Well, I do want to give the Kings some credit. They did contain Kyle Connor for the Winnipeg Jets. He is a sniper, one of the better goal scorers in the NHL. He was coming off a hat trick in his previous game. He did have an assist on the power play goal for Winnipeg, but he was otherwise pretty contained in this game. He didn't really have any high quality scoring chances that I can remember. So good for the Kings to do a good job on Kyle Connor. Do have to mention a couple of former Kings did have points in this one. Alex Iafallo scored the first goal on the power play, and former King Gabe Vilardi had 2 assists in the win. I gave you a Jim Hiller quote earlier. I didn't hear his quotes. I only read them on kingsinsider.com, so I don't know the tone in which they were given. But it wasn't like he was quite as complimentary about the Kings game as maybe I am. And again, I'm not suggesting that he should necessarily be that way. Look, there's pressure on him. There's pressure on the organization. I thought he was properly critical of the Kings in that if the Kings are a team that is some kind of a contender, like it seems like the organization believes they are, or at least is selling that they are, these good games without the results aren't enough, and when we get to the playoffs, it's not about playing a good game. It's about winning and advancing and having progress. And I get all that. I'm just saying, for me, early in the season against good teams on the road, if you play a pretty good game and you come up short, I'm okay with it in a manner of speaking. Like I said, I want to be fair to the team. I want to be fair to the players. I thought they played a really good game. And I think the best way to say it is, if the Kings play against the Jets, if they play games like they played against the Jets more often than not this season, I think we will see 2 points and we will see positive results. So that's my takeaway from this loss to Winnipeg. But a loss is still a loss. Glad to see a Kings player with a big spotlight on him come up big in this game. We will get into that next year on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to bet across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you'd like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It is quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sunday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. We are talking about a tough 3-2 loss to the Winnipeg Jets on Saturday, and let's get into some of the individual performances for the Kings. I did want to give you the Kings starting lineup in this one. It is the same starting lineup that we had in the season opener. It is the same set of forwards and defense we had for the second game of the season. But I did highlight, if you're watching on YouTube, 2 players, Alex Laferriere and Joel Armia, because during this game, Jim Hiller decided to move Armia to the second line and drop Laferriere down to the fourth line. And I will say that I think that Joel Armia has been the best of the new additions for the LA Kings. And some of you might say that's not saying much. And of course, Corey Perry hasn't been there yet. But no, but the point I'm trying to make is I like Joel Armia. I think he's done really good. I think he's fit in nicely. He's playing on the second power play unit, which I did not see coming, killing penalties. I think he's been very solid. I think he's been a good addition. That having been said, I hope this move was just something that Jim Hiller felt like he needed to do in the moment, in the game. Hopefully Laferriere is back on the second line for the game on Monday. If not, I would say that I have a problem with that, but that's something we'll address if that happens going forward. Darcy Kuemper was great in this game. I thought he was the Kings' best player. I thought he had several high-quality saves. All 3 goals that he let in were basically not stoppable, in my opinion, or none of them were soft goals by any stretch. The first goal was on the power play. He was put in a difficult situation. Adrian Kempe was on the boards, checking Gabe Vilardi. Andrei Kopitar was up high on the point. Mikey Anderson was defending Kyle Connor, who had the puck at the side of the net, and that left Mark Scheifele at the back door and Alex Iafallo in front of the net. And Edmondson had to make a choice once the pass was made from Connor to Iafallo. Do I go after Iafallo and leave the backdoor pass open, or do I cover the backdoor pass and leave Iafallo alone with Darcy Kemper? He made the right decision. He played the pass, because if that pass is made, it's a tap-in goal. At least this way you give your goaltender a chance. But Iafallo made a nice shot, time and space in a dangerous area. And that was just the circumstance. I guess if I had to blame someone on that play, I think Andrei Kopitar was too far towards the point. He needed to be down lower to help out on that position, and he was not able to do so. But I think that was a quality scoring opportunity that Winnipeg scored on. The second goal was just after the Kings killed off a penalty, and this was the decisive goal of the game as far as I'm concerned. I know you could say, well, the game-winning goal was a decisive goal, but the Kings had dominated the second period. This was pretty much a nothing backhand shot. Mark Scheifele just put it on net. It wasn't a good scoring opportunity, but unfortunately, as Mikey Anderson was back trying to defend against it, the puck went off him and past Darcy Kemper, and that's just bad luck. So that was a goal that Darcy Kemper had no shot on. And the same thing goes for the third goal, the game-winning goal. A beautiful mid-air deflection by Mark Scheifele. That's just a great goal. Nothing Kemper could have done about that, because the shot was actually going wide of the net. There was not even a save for him to make, but Scheifele skillfully directed it into the net. So I thought Darcy Kemper actually had his best game of the season, clearly, and a very good game for the Kings. Adrian Kempe, I have said that it looks like maybe the contract situation is affecting his play. I didn't think he had looked like himself for the first two games of the year. I thought he looked like himself in this game. He had a goal. He had an assist. The goal was gorgeous. First off, Kempe starts it off by making a nice hustle play to get to a loose puck, gets it over to Kuzmenko. He passes it to Kopitar, who sets up Kempe for a tap-in goal at the side of the net. A gorgeous passing play, as good as you can do it. Fantastic. So Kempe finishes that off for his first goal of the year, and he had the secondary assist on a Mikey Anderson goal. And he had several other chances. He hit the post on an odd man rush. I thought overall a good game for Adrian Kempe. I was glad to see it. We do have some Kempe contract news that we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but Juice had a good game against the Jets. Andrei Kopitar, the captain, had another assist. That's 3 assists in 3 games. I'm not 100% sure he also didn't score the first goal of the game, his first of the season. He put a great screen on Jets goalie Connor Hellebuck, point shot from Mikey Anderson. Kopi, great screen. Now, he might have deflected it. It was hard to tell on the replay. His stick was in the area. The goal did go to Mikey Anderson, but Kopitar with that great screen was certainly, that doesn't show up on the score sheet, but that is him helping a lot on that goal. And obviously, I just mentioned the primary assist on the Kempe goal. Kopitar now at 1,281 career points. He's now 27 away from breaking Marcel Dion's record as the Los Angeles Kings all-time franchise scoring leader. Jeff Malott dropped the gloves for a second time this season after a hit on Alex Turcotte. Hard hit into the boards. Nothing too over the line in my opinion, but I get why Malott is doing this. He's not only protecting his teammates, but he's also trying to do anything he can to show his worth to the coaching staff so that he can stay on the team when Corey Perry returns. The fight was with Luke Shen, and I thought it was a draw. But good for Jeff Malott, as always, for sticking up for his teammates. I wanted to talk about Quinton Byfield and Brandt Clarke together because we have such high hopes for two players that we hope are going to be cornerstone franchise players going forward. And they both had a great game against Vegas. And we've talked about how not only do they need to be good, but they need to be, especially in the case of Quinton Byfield, consistently good. And while neither was bad in this game against Winnipeg, as a matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say Brandt Clarke was very good. Neither of them had any impactful plays, though. They had a lot of good plays. They were involved a lot, especially Brandt Clarke, but there weren't those, they didn't have any points. And they weren't just those really impactful plays that led to goals. Clarke did have another play where he jumped up in the play and was going hard to the net. Unfortunately, the pass didn't connect with him, but like to see that. And again, I thought he had a good game, but those two guys didn't show up on the score sheet. And we've talked about how if they're going to take that next step, they need to be more consistent than just doing those things every now and then. So I guess it was a little disappointing that neither of them were on the score sheet in this one. Cody Ceci, he was on the ice for the game-winning goal. He was defending Mark Scheifele, who scored the game-winning goal. In hindsight, maybe he could have tied Scheifele up in front of the net. But as I mentioned, it was a shot that was going wide. Scheifele made a great play on it. To me, I'm not going to be all over Cody Ceci for that one. I thought for the great majority of the game, he was pretty unnoticeable, and that might sound bad, but it really isn't, because he has been noticeable for negative things in the first two games. Turnovers, not being, in the right place, but he's still a -5 on the season. I don't want to, it seems like a lot of people are looking for reasons to bash Cody Ceci, and I'm not saying there aren't reasons to do so, but I thought, and I still think he was fine. He was fine in this game, and the Kings need him to be fine. So even though he was on the ice for the game-winning goal and even defending the guy who scored, I didn't think Cody Ceci had a bad game. And unfortunately, that's at the moment, that's kind of where we are with him, in that if he doesn't have a bad game, then we're kind of happy about it. So it is what it is with him right now. We do have Adrian Kempe contract news. We will talk about that and more. You're on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. All right, so we have a report on the ongoing Adrian Kempe contract negotiations. Elliot Friedman, who I think is the best hockey insider in the business, was on the Fan Hockey Show, which is the show of friend of the show and former Kings assistant general manager Mike Fuda. And I admit I did not have time to go and track down this interview to listen to it personally, but I saw that this was a tweet that was credited Elliot Friedman. I'm assuming that it is accurate. But here, if you're watching on YouTube, I will post the tweet or the post on X. And it says, quoting Elliot Friedman, quote, talking about the contract negotiations, "It's been pretty far apart. It's been tough to bridge the gap. It's still not close," end quote. And this report comes off the heels of ESPN's Emily Kaplan basically reporting the same thing. So obviously, I don't know the numbers for either side at this point. Early reports were that Kempe was looking for around 10.5 million per season on an 8-year deal. There were reports the Kings' initial offer was under 9 million per season. How things have progressed or not progressed from that, I don't know. Is it possible that some of the other signings around the NHL might have caused Adrian Kempe to up his offer or what he's looking for to maybe towards 11? I think it's possible, but I don't know that. I was optimistic about this getting done going into the season. It just made way too much sense. Kempe is too important of a player. As I've said before, he's done everything right. You drafted him, you developed him. He's arguably the Kings' best player. I think he's the Kings' best player. For it to be where it is at this point, it's very disappointing, and I will have to say it is concerning. I hope we have some more positive news to report soon, but after hearing, and I really thought something was going to get done. I was optimistic. It just seemed like, hey, Kempe wants to be here. Ken Holland wants him to be here. They just have to find that number. But multiple reports now that they are not close has me concerned. One bit of interesting Kings news from an organizational standpoint. The team's COO, Kelly Cheeseman, who actually follows this show's account on X, he has left the Kings organization and has joined the New York Islanders. He was the chief operating officer for the Kings, and he leaves to become the president of the New York Islanders and USB Arena. I've never met Kelly Cheeseman, but I have heard nothing but very, very good things about him. I would have to say this seems like not good news for AEG and the LA Kings. by all accounts, again, he was a very, very good guy, very, very well respected, and did a great job for the team. I think I heard on the game broadcast that he started in ticket sales or in the ticket office for the Kings and worked his way up 25 years in the organization, the last 13 years in what was his previous position as chief operating officer. So the only thing I would say about this is the timing seems odd. I mean, you would think that this is the type of thing that would happen in the offseason, not once the season is started. And I'm not suggesting anything. It's just an observation that the timing of it does seem a little bit odd. And it appears that this is just the case of someone getting a better opportunity with another team. And I have to assume more money, right? That's what it's usually all about. Getting a bigger title. I'm sure there's going to be people out there that will say, Kelly Cheeseman would have been a great replacement for Luc Robitaille as team president. And I think Luc Robitaille is on the hot seat to an extent. And now that person who had been in the organization for a long, long time, if there was to be a change, and there certainly is nothing, eminent about that, that's somebody who's not going to be available for that position now. So, like I said, a lot of people said great things about Kelly Cheeseman. A lot of people wishing him well, including Luc Robitaille and the organization putting out releases. Jim Fox had some kind words to say on the broadcast. So seems like an unfortunate loss for the LA Kings. Finally, I did want to mention that the Ontario Reign played their season opener on Friday night. They unfortunately lost at home to the Tucson Roadrunners 5-4 in overtime in the debut of head coach Andrew Lord. By the way, for what it's worth, former Reign coach Marco Sturm, now 3-0 as head coach of the Boston Bruins. Good for Marco. As for the Reign, they had a 2-1 lead after the first period on goals by Andre Lee and Francesco Pinelli. They had a 3-2 lead after 2 periods. Otto Jemsen scored in the second period, and Akil Thomas scored in the third. But Tucson scored twice, including the equalizer with just 12 seconds left in regulation. It went into overtime, and they won it 51 seconds into OT. Eric Portillo took the loss in net. He allowed 5 goals on 27 shots. So the Reign lose their season opener, but they'll go at it again in their second game of the season that is coming up on Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. As for the Kings' next game, it is Monday in Minnesota against the Wild, who lost to the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think it was 7-4 was the final score. Minnesota 1-1 now on the season. The Kings now 1-2. Face-off will be set at 5 p.m. Pacific time from Minnesota on Monday. For you everydayers, those you listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, our next show will be following that Kings Wild game on Monday evening. We'll have a complete recap and hopefully talk about an LA Kings victory. As always, if you would like to stay in contact with the show, you can send us an email at any time about anything. LockedOnEddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You're always welcome to post your thoughts on each show. If you're watching on YouTube, in the comment section, we'd love for you to stay connected with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Locked On LA Kings. And if you're a fan of the show, please tell your friends about the podcast and the YouTube show if they are not aware of it. Word of mouth is a wonderful way to spread the word about the show. And if you want some extra Kings content, if this is not enough for you, we have fan chats, we have some exclusive shows, different things over there at LA Kings Extra. Send me an email, lakingsextra@gmail.com. We'll give you the info on that. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you on our next show. And as always, go Kings, go.